What's up, guys? This is Nick from Arch City Poker, and in today's video, going to be continuing the poker hand review series with today's topic covering a hand that will be a bluff catcher. So bluff catching will be essentially the topic. I am in a 6 max no limit 25-cent 50-cent game here, or NL50 for you online guys that are going to hurt me on that. But I open pocket aces under the gun for 2.5x, flat by the cutoff, and we will see a flop heads up. SPR is about 17, and I think on this flop texture, my opponent has a little bit of a range advantage. I think players in this specific player pool are flatting a lot of combos that hit this board quite well. I don't feel comfortable going for 3 streets of value with this specific combo, so I think that because he has the range advantage somewhat on this flop texture, and I think he could put me in a really uncomfortable spot, I think that checking, hoping that it checks through, and then being able to hopefully go bet on the turn and river is a good plan. I think check calling down is fine also. I think if you want to argue that you should c-bet here and then try to control the pot later, that's probably okay, but I don't like to c-bet too frequently on this flop texture. I don't think I should be. And I'm going to use PO Solver. If you guys don't know what that is, it's a very nice and sophisticated piece of software. I'm going to show you guys what PO says. It's a GTO solver, so it's basically going to tell me what my frequency should be in theory. But without further ado, I guess let's get back into the hand. So I do go for check call. Pretty standard for me in that spot, I think. And 8 of clubs, specifically on the turn, is a very good card for me. I think that I actually have, I think my equity has increased a good amount on this card, and we'll see what PO says. But obviously, a lot of the hands that are worse than mine, especially his draws that don't hit this card, I think this card's very good for me. So I don't think there's any reason to lead, though. I don't think I really have a whole lot of 8x in my range, and I think I do better by check calling. So I do go ahead and check, and he calls. Or I'm sorry, he bets, I call. And river's a 5 of spades. Pretty inconspicuous card. Pretty much a brick. I guess he could have some 9-6 suited in his range, but I pretty much doubt that from... I don't know this player. I think it's important to note that I don't know him. I'm just going by what I think the average player in this player pool does, and I don't think a lot of them are flatting 9-6 suited or 9-6 at all, I guess, so I don't think this 5 does really anything. I don't think he's really barreling pocket 5s here all that often, although he could have it sometimes, but I check, and he goes all in for about 2x, essentially. Really tough spot. I think that what matters about this spot is if you have a specific read on your player and on his bluffing frequencies here, or his lack of bluffing frequency, that is going to matter significantly with this type of hand. If he overbluffs, this is a very easy call. If he bluffs at what I think is probably the correct frequency, I think this is probably a fold still. And I think obviously if he underbluffs and he's going to be very value heavy, then this obviously will be a fold. So interesting spot. What I came to the conclusion of is that players in lower stakes, like lower stake online games, tend to overbluff, I think, in these spots. And I think players in live low stakes games tend to underbluff. So I just kind of went with the read on the average player from this player pool and went with a call. And ended up being incorrect as he shows me the boat. So not the most fun hand, but I will go into PO and show you guys specifically a couple of things I was talking about. So if we go to the beginning here, and if you guys have never seen PO or used it before, it's really cool. You essentially can plug in ranges and percentages for, what, I guess, like what bet size is and all that type of stuff, essentially. And then PO will run the solver will run, and essentially it's going to solve for the hand and what is supposed to be GTO. In this specific hand, as you guys can see, PO does not think I should be betting on this board texture all that often with how our ranges are constructed. So I was correct in a sense that I don't think I should be betting my combo of aces all that often. On the turn, I wanted to point out to you guys that the 8 of clubs I thought was a very good card for my range. And so we will go to run out comparison. I'll show you guys. So my out of position equity on that card is going to be very good. And as you guys can see, a lot of turn cards are very good for my range. And specifically, the only ones that are not so good, but I still have more than enough equity to continue on, are nines and queens. I think that makes sense with a lot of the hands that he is betting with that are semi bluffs or just, or yeah, I guess essentially just like semi bluffs. But like I said, I think that card is very good for my range. And I think at this point, as you guys can see, that the equity has shifted pretty tremendously into my favor. So I think a lot of really tight players will possibly even check fold in this spot with aces, thinking that their opponent just has trip eights or a straight or boats or stuff like that. But that eight is a very good card for my range. And if I go back and show you guys on this flop texture that I, in fact, don't have the range advantage. And that's what I thought. I thought in position, I thought the player with this calling range had the range or had the range advantage. So I was correct about that. So getting to the river, the most important part, my opponent, according to PO, in a GTO sense, should only be betting about 45% of the time here. And as you can see, he's got 13 combos he's supposed to bet and 16 that he's pretty much supposed to check. And this is supposed to be like his correct frequencies with his bluffs. So you can see, for example, with a hand like Queen 10 of diamonds, which could definitely fit into his bluffing frequencies, PO has him only bluffing at about 19% of the time, which will be optimal. That will apparently be the correct rate of bluffing or the right bluffing frequency. Like I said, I think most players in these online low stakes games are over bluffing in these spots, and they tend to be a little more aggressive. So I think, as you can see with these club and diamond combos that have missed, I think my opponent is actually barreling these a little more often, and that could certainly change my strategy. So to show you guys, and don't pay attention to these numbers, this is not obviously the dollar amounts that were bet. This is just set up for, I had it set up in my mind for a live 2-5 game, which is a lot of the work I've been doing recently. So all that matters is really paying attention to the frequencies and how often I should be calling. So don't pay attention to the numbers necessarily. But when my opponent bets the all in on the river, I'm only supposed to call about 42% of the time. And as you can see, aces do not fit into my calling range at all. Like, it is a big mistake to call with aces here. And this is based on my opponent bluffing, though, at the correct frequencies. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to show you guys how to adjust and use this software for your specific player pool, is I'm going to go and use this lock node function where I set his strategy. So essentially what I'm going to do is change from the optimal strategy that PO suggests to what I think he actually does. And so I'm going to go in here. Clubs, I think that he missed with. I think because if he's any good at all, I think that he believes my calling range shouldn't have a lot of clubs in it. And if it's diamond heavy, then I will be more often folding. So I think that a lot of players will potentially bluff all their clubs and missed, I guess, like, and or like clubs plus gutters or whatever, but essentially miss clubs. I think a lot of players will barrel at 100% frequencies. I don't think there's any absolutes in poker often, so I'm gonna say, we'll say 80% of the time, just to be somewhat reasonable. So, excuse me, guys, we're going to put in all these club combos that I think he possibly turns into bluffs, as my line looks really weak to a lot of players in this pool, and they just think that I will not be check calling down with pocket aces a lot of times in that spot. So I am going to put in a lot of these combos, and obviously I have the ace of clubs, but Pia will take that into account, so I'm not too worried about this. But I do think that he will be bluffing his clubs much more frequently. Diamonds, if he's like somewhat of a thinking player, he shouldn't be barreling those too often because it blocks a lot of my flop calling range. So I should be more pair heavy if he blocks diamonds. But I do think that he will bluff them at a higher frequency than what PO is suggesting. So I think with the ones where he has gutters and diamonds, he's going to be about a quarter of the time. And like I said, guys, this is not an exact science. This is just my best guesstimation, I guess, on what the average player does in this player pool. So I will add these combos. I think that, yeah, I think this is probably correct. And I think that I'm being maybe not, I don't know what, I guess like maybe not generous enough to where I think a lot of players may even be closer to like 50 to 66%. There are a lot of players that'll be closer to 100, but like I said, I'm trying to go on what the average player does. And I think this might be a little low for the average player, but I'm trying to be somewhat reasonable and not be too biased and arrogant into thinking that my call was correct. So we'll keep it pretty low and say this player does consider the fact that he could block some of my weaker calling range. And we're going to plug that in. We'll go into his checking range and make sure that these are correct. So clubs, I had him at what, about 80% of the time. So we're going to say 20% of the time he's checking these. And get this situated for you guys real quick here. I don't know how this combo fit in all of a sudden. This is not in there. Yeah, so I think that is correct. Oh no, sorry, I gotta go back and do his diamonds also. So we'll go back to his diamonds real quick. And I think, like I said, we gave him about a quarter of the time on a lot of these. So we're gonna say he's checking these about 75% of the time. I think these were all correct. And then again, I don't know how that king 8 suited fit in there because I don't think that's in his range. So yeah, I think that is a little more accurate. So all of a sudden it's flipped to where instead of betting 13 combos and checking 16, he's now betting 16 and checking 13. You guys might think that's barely any kind of change at all, or it shouldn't really change what I do at all. But I'm going to tell you guys right now, I haven't looked at this yet. I'm willing to bet that it is correct to call with my specific combo now. So what I'll do is go back to the solver, run it real quick, and we will see if my call was correct based on what I think about the average player from this player pool. So he bets. And okay, so this is crazy to me. I didn't think that it would be this high. I'm not sure if I messed something up, but I don't think I did. I'll go back and check for you guys. But yeah, so as you can see, if my opponent is bluffing at a frequency that I think a lot of the players in this player pool are, I could be wrong about that. I've been playing more PLO on that site, but from what I've noticed, there's a lot of really aggressive players, especially the ones from like Russia and Ukraine. They are often over bluffing the spot, I think, and my combo clearly fits in. So even if I adjust the frequencies down to, like if I took some of his club frequencies down a little bit, if I took his diamonds even down a little bit more, I think aces becomes still a call, probably more of a flip. But I think it was just a really interesting spot to show you guys that based on what a player's frequencies are, even if it's changed just a little bit to where he's betting 3 more combos than he's checking compared to what's optimal, it really can change what you do in certain spots as far as your strategy. And I think what to take away from this video, guys, is that if you don't know your opponent, you really should just go based on what you think an average player from that player pool would do. In a live low stakes game, I am not calling this river because I don't think my opponents are ever bluffing at a high enough frequency in the spot, not even close to the correct frequency. Online, especially on this site, I think that players are in fact a little bit more aggressive than standard in these spots. And so I think it makes it correct to call. So yeah, results oriented in hindsight, my call was incorrect and I lost a good amount of money in that pot. But I think in theory, I made the correct call. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to fire away in the comment section. I apologize for this video going a little bit longer than usual, but I thought this was a pretty interesting hand. And for this video series in particular, sometimes it will go a little longer since I'm using software and trying to analyze hands and show you guys how to properly do that. So like I said, yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, let me know. This is Nick from Arch City Poker. Till next time, guys.